You have been trying to predict reality your entire life. Every morning you wake into a calculation. Which path leads to a better outcome? Which choice avoids the pain? Which investment of your finite hours yields the highest return? The mind runs its algorithms ceaselessly, scanning for patterns, hunting for edges, desperate to get ahead of what comes next. And yet, the stock market does not care about your charts. The relationship you planned for 10 years dissolves in a single conversation. The career you built brick by brick gets swept away by a technology that did not exist when you started. You read the signs, you studied the indicators, you did everything right. Still, reality moved faster than your understanding of it. There is a particular exhaustion that comes from trying to master what cannot be mastered. It lives in the shoulders of the person refreshing their portfolio at midnight, in the hollow eyes of the parent who mapped out their child's future, only to watch them choose something unrecognizable, in the spiritual seeker who read every book, attended every retreat, and still cannot find peace. This exhaustion is the natural consequence of playing an infinite game with finite rules. Consider what happens inside a single cell of your body right now. Proteins fold into shapes more varied than atoms in the known universe. Enzymes transport molecules across bridges that other enzymes dismantle in real time, step by step behind them. DNA encodes instructions readable in every direction simultaneously. A three-dimensional book where meaning flows forward, backward, vertically, diagonally. Scientists have mapped portions of this system for decades and still cannot explain why certain mechanisms activate when they do. No signal detected and no command observed, yet the work continues. Trillions of these operations happen inside you every second without your awareness, without your permission, without your control. If you cannot predict what happens in your body, what made you think you could predict the world? The ancient mind evolved for a simple game. Recognize the tiger, find the shelter, secure the food, survive until tomorrow. The rules were brutal but clear. Scarcity was the constant and choice was rare. Now you stand in the grocery store paralyzed by 47 varieties of olive oil. Now you scroll through infinite feeds, each video promising the next might be the one that changes everything. You can learn any language, visit any country, become any version of yourself, and the weight of that freedom presses down like a stone on the chest. The paradox of choice is not just a modern inconvenience, it is an actual evolutionary mismatch. Your brain was not built for this. The hardware running your decisions was optimized for a world that no longer exists. Watch what happens when you encounter something truly new. The brain lights up, dopamine floods the system, interest sharpens into hunger. You want more, so you scroll further, you click the next link. The algorithm learns your patterns and feeds them back to you, refined, concentrated, weaponized. This is not a flaw in the system, this is the system working exactly as designed. Novelty is the hook and attention is the currency. You're both the product and the consumer, caught in a loop that feels like freedom but functions like a cage. There is another way to engage with the unknown, not prediction, nor control, nor the desperate grasping for certainty that leaves you more anxious than before. Surrender. Not the surrender of defeat or the collapse into passivity, but the surrender of the wave that stops fighting the ocean. The surrender of the breath that releases without forcing the next inhale. The surrender that recognizes you were never separate from the current carrying you. A child enters the world with an ego the size of the visible universe. Cry and the world responds. Hunger becomes food. Discomfort becomes warmth. The infant does not know it is separate from everything else. It simply is, and the world arranges itself around that being. This is pure survival. Without that primal sense of self, there would be no agency, no direction, no capacity to act. The ego is scaffolding. It builds the structure that allows you to navigate reality before you understand what reality is. But scaffolding is meant to come down. The teenager who believes they know everything, the young adult who cringes at their old journal entries, the midlife crisis that shatters certainties held for decades. These are not failures, but necessary demolitions that make room for something larger. What remains when the scaffolding falls? Not nothing, not the void the ego fears. What remains is the awareness that was there before the scaffolding was built. The consciousness that watched the ego construct its elaborate defenses and believed for a time that it was those defenses. You are not your predictions or your plans. You are not the story you tell yourselves about who you should become. You are the one watching the story unfold. A comedian stands on stage with no prepared material. The audience paid money, the lights are hot, the silence stretches. And from that silence something emerges. A joke that did not exist until the moment it was spoken. A truth wrapped in absurdity. A mirror held up to the room that makes everyone laugh at what they already knew but could not say. This is what happens when you stop trying to control the outcome and start responding to what is actually present. The best improvisers do not plan their next line while their partner is speaking. They listen. They trust that something will arise from the space between them, and it does, every time. The same principle applies to the life you are living right now. You cannot script the conversation before it happens. You cannot rehearse the response to a crisis that has not yet arrived. You cannot optimize your way to meaning. What you can do is show up, pay attention, and respond to what is actually in front of you, rather than a projection of what you fear or hope might come. This is presence manifest, and presence is the only place where real choice exists. Time is the constraint that makes everything matter. Without limits, there is no prioritization. Without prioritization, there is no meaning. Without meaning, there is only the endless scroll, the infinite feed, the paralysis of consciousness drowning in options it cannot evaluate. The artist who spends 10 years mastering a craft creates something different from the algorithm that generates a similar image in seconds. Not because the output looks different, sometimes it does not, but because the artist's work carries the weight of time invested, decisions made, paths not taken. You cannot fake that weight. You cannot shortcut your way to significance. Alan Watts understood something most of us spend our lives avoiding. If you were omnipotent, he said, you would eventually grow bored. Knowing everything, controlling everything, no surprises left, no uncertainty to navigate, no risk that makes the reward meaningful. So what would you do? You would forget. You would limit yourself. You would enter a game where the outcome was genuinely unknown, where the stakes felt real, where the struggle mattered because it could actually be lost. You would become exactly what you are right now. The surprise is the gift you cannot give yourself. This is why prediction fails, not because you're not smart enough, not because you lack information, but because the very thing you're trying to eliminate is the thing that makes the game worth playing. Uncertainty is not the obstacle to a meaningful life. Uncertainty is the condition that makes meaning possible. So what do you do with this? You stop trying to win a game that was never designed to be won. You notice the exhaustion that comes from constant calculation, and you let it teach you something. You practice responding instead of predicting, receiving instead of controlling, trusting the process that built your cells, your breath, your capacity for wonder. You remember that the scaffolding was always temporary, that the ego was a tool, not a destination, that the awareness watching all of this unfold has never been threatened by any of it. And you laugh. Not because it is funny, but because laughter is what happens when the tension between what you expected and what actually is finally releases. The infinite game continues. You were never meant to master it. You were meant to play.